In today's video, we're discussing the new trade rumor that Jeff Petry would like a trade out of the Montreal Canadiens organization. We also look at some other potential Habs deals ahead of the deadline and some information from new GM Ken Hughes. We also have an update from Elliotte Friedman on the Vancouver Canucks trade rumor situation. Many forwards in play there as well, including some more updates on the Florida Panthers and who they're targeting for the blue line. Plus, we have a signing in Minnesota and some news on Willie O'Ree. All that coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to talk about here today. First up, we got news that the Wild have extended forward Jordan Greenway. He gets a 3-year contract extension at $3 million per season and $9 million total value. Of course, Greenway's been, I guess you could call him a pretty consistent, fairly important piece there of the Wild's forward group with their top 9. Certainly not the most offensively gifted guy on the team for sure, but certainly plays a role and does it well, and has been kind of coming into his own, finding a spot there on the team. So certainly $3 million at 3 years is not an overly that's not a big contract, not really a lot of risk there, I don't think, with what you get from Greenway night in, night out. There was a time a while back, actually, when Greenway was even possibly mentioned as possibly being a trade piece for the Wild. That was more so last summer, but I think he's kind of found him a good spot there at the Wild this year. The team's having a lot of success, so obviously with the extension, that certainly seems like they value him as a good piece of their core moving forward. Now, as I mentioned as well, we also have news today on Willie O'Ree. Of course, Willie O'Ree was a well-known player who had just recently had his number retired by the Boston Bruins, the first black player to play in the NHL and break the color barrier. Obviously, a very instrumental piece about helping the NHL kind of become more inclusive and certainly promote the game of hockey. He's been an ambassador with the NHL for quite some time now. And we've learned today that Willie will be awarded the Congressional Gold Medal from U.S. President Joe Biden for extraordinary contributions and commitment to hockey, inclusion, and recreational opportunities. So another example of him being honored, which I think is tremendously deserved. Of course, most of you probably know by now, Willie O'Ree is from my hometown of Fredericton, New Brunswick. So certainly we're very proud of everything he's accomplished in his life. Certainly not only breaking down barriers, but really promoting the game in a variety of ways and really helping it be a lot more inclusive. We certainly want to get to the point where we truly feel like hockey is for everyone. I don't know that we're there yet. There's lots of work to be done, but he's certainly played a big role in helping the progress that we've seen here so far. So nice to see Willie once again get more acknowledgement and get a great honor from the United States president. Now, as I mentioned, we have some pretty substantial trade rumors to talk about today, including the Panthers, the Canucks, and the Habs. First up, we'll talk about the Florida Panthers. Obviously, we've talked a lot about them wanting to add going into the deadline. They're certainly having a phenomenal season. They view themselves as being a real solid cup contender, and I don't think that any team would disagree with that. They're certainly one of the league's best teams, and the area that they seem to be focused on the most to add on is on the blue line. We talked a bit about in yesterday's video the fact that Owen Tippett appears to be the player that they're kind of dangling the most in trade talks with teams trying to get something done here. Obviously, Tippett's a young up-and-coming forward who's got a knack for scoring goals. At least he was a big-time goal scorer in junior. Certainly trying to find his way. He's had ups and downs in the NHL, but still has a lot of potential, and I think a lot of teams would have value with him. Another young player I think is getting a lot of attention is Anton Lundell, but I really think they're extremely fond of Lundell. Not only his offense, but his two-way play already at a young age. As much as teams are going to ask about Lundell and any of these packages that they're trying to get done, I don't see the Panthers going down that road. At least I would be very shocked if they did. But the two names that they're mainly linked to on the blue line, according to Elliotte Friedman in his latest 32 Thoughts podcast, are Chychrun in Arizona and Klingberg in Dallas. Now, both of these guys have been well known in NHL trade rumor circles for some time now. We know that Klingberg has officially even asked for a trade out of Dallas or an opportunity to be moved. We know that Chychrun's been mentioned for some time. At one point, he was considered an untouchable by the Coyotes, but now it looks as though they're willing to move him for the right price. The prices are high. I would suspect the price on Chychrun's going to be a fair bit higher than Klingberg, given the fact that he's younger, he comes with term, and obviously, there's a lot to like about his game, where Klingberg could be a rental or he could be a sign and extend kind of player, and if the extension goes along with it, it will certainly increase the value for sure. But, I'm not really sure that's likely going to happen. Klingberg could be moved and then obviously explore free agency in the offseason. But those are the two main defensemen that the Panthers are targeting. I personally think that they'd probably prefer Chychrun, but the price tag's so high that they may end up going more for a guy like Klingberg. Now, there's other defensemen out there on the market that would certainly suit what they're looking for as well, but those are the two main names that they're currently linked to. Now, when it comes to Vancouver, they've been the hot topic here, along with Montreal, in the last number of days, as Elliotte Friedman and other insiders are reporting that Jim Rutherford is certainly having a lot of conversations about many players on his team now that they have their GM in place and assistant GM, that they're certainly open to making moves. And I guess a fair way to put this is they're really testing the value on the market for many of these players, trying to decide how to reshape this team. There's no getting around the fact that they're definitely going to be making some moves, and they're looking for cap flexibility in the process. It's going to be tough to do, but it's fair to say that their goal, at least, is to move out some salary, in any players that come back in return, ideally, they'd probably prefer less term or less money on the contract, less AAV, so they can get some cap flexibility. Now, because a lot of teams are up against it, and many of the teams that are contenders and going for playoffs have view themselves as wanting to add, those teams don't have a lot of wiggle room, so it's going to get tricky, and we're likely going to see a lot of deals this year heading to the deadline that are either going to be like three-way deals or multiple moving parts, because teams that have the cap space will have to take on different pieces here and retain salary to kind of make things work for some teams and try to exploit some extra assets out of it for doing that. But of course, you're only going to mainly see that on short-term situations. But the thing to watch with that as well is teams can only retain salary on so many players, and it gets 3 players that they can retain on. So a team like the Coyotes, who have made it known they're willing to do those types of deals, already have a few deals like that, so they can only take one more within their cap rules as well. So we'll see what happens. But obviously JT Miller seems to be like the crown jewel for Canuck forwards and players that have been out there. I think it's kind of started more so before they even got their staff in place. Teams were calling due to the fact that the Canucks were not having a great season. They were struggling. Obviously, they were in a situation where they're out of the playoffs. Right now, they're not in a playoff spot either. So there's still a lot of talk about what they're going to do. Miller's a fierce competitor, arguably one of their best players. Probably been their best player this year. So you have to wonder what kind of message that would send to trade him as well. But he's certainly not the only one. As Friedman's mentioned, it goes much deeper than Miller. We're talking about Brock Besser. We're talking about Connor Garland. We're talking about Tanner Pearson. Any and all of these guys could possibly be traded. The main names that appear to be like your, somewhat your untouchables that are not having conversation about right now are Pettersson, Hughes, Demko, and Horvat. It's been revealed that to get a guy like Miller, though, is going to take 3 or 4 assets, and I know teams like the Rangers and Bruins and other teams have been reportedly, very interested in acquiring him. But it's going to be quite a hefty price the way he's been playing, so it's certainly going to be debatable. They may have to settle for some of these other guys. Even a guy like Besser is going to command a high price tag as well. Some question his qualifying offer of $7.5 million coming up this offseason, and whether or not he will be a part of the future as well. At the same time, though, he has played much better under new coach Bruce Boudreau, so you have to wonder what they're going to do. Obviously, Garland has a lot of interest as well. The Devils have been a team along with other teams like the Bruins have been mentioned. The Devils were highly involved in Garland trade talks before he ended up in Vancouver as well. So certainly that's, expect that interest to kind of reignite there. He comes with a good contract, cost-controlled situation. It makes sense that he would certainly garner a lot of interest. While it's not completely clear which direction they're going to go or who's going to be traded, it's fair to say right now the situation of Vancouver is an evaluation of gauging the market on all these forwards and determining who goes so they can get some salary cap relief and shape this team differently moving forward. Now, as I mentioned in Montreal, we have some pretty significant news. The fact that it appears as though Jeff Petry would like to be traded out of the Montreal Canadiens organization. It looks like he hasn't officially demanded or said trade me, but he said he would welcome a trade. And there's some reports indicating this even happened a number of weeks back. Now, of course, Petry's coming under fire here recently. Of course, we know that Samuel Montembeault was run in the game against the Oilers by Zach Kassian. Petry was very nearby on the ice. Nobody responded at all to the hit. The goalie getting run, the mask came off. It looks as though in a lot of ways Jeff Petry's kind of checked out. His stats are in the toilet. The play, you get the feeling that his heart's not in it. At least that's how it looks a lot of nights. I think he's had a few better games recently, but still, I've seen the Habs play a lot this year, and Petry just doesn't seem to be the same. I know he's been out for a while too with he was out of the lineup for some time. His family stayed back in the U.S. and Michigan, so clearly they're not happy with a lot of the COVID protocols in Quebec and Canada. So certainly that's playing a role too. And it's just a variety of things. Combination of the team likely going through a rebuild, and obviously the COVID stuff. And it's just, there's a lot going on. And it's fair to say that Petry would welcome a trade. It kind of sounds a lot the same way that the Max Pacioretty situation kind of started as well. It's not, he denied the fact that he wanted a trade, but was kind of okay with it, but wasn't asking for a type of deal. Hughes has come out and acknowledged the fact that he'd be open to trading Petry if the right deal comes along, if they can make the team better, and he'd accommodate Petry as well. Obviously, he'd prefer a trade to a U.S. market, ideally probably closest to home as possible in Michigan, but obviously hard to say exactly where he ends up. He's 34 years old. He's got 3 years left at $6.25 million, and he's not having a good season. But Elliotte Friedman mentioned he still feels there's a lot of interest, or at least a decent amount of interest in Petry, given how he played last year. I mean, this is a kind of an anomaly this year in Montreal. I don't know if it's really fair to take a lot of the players there on the value that they're given right now. I think you put a lot of them in different situations on different competitive teams and whatnot, and I think you're going to see a different player. So I don't think that it's going to completely dry up the market for Petry. There appears to be interest, and he does have a modified no trade, so he does have some control over his potential landing spot as well. We even seen a situation where their last game against Columbus, he did not have the A on his jersey, so that appears to be gone. So that's certainly telling. You could tell Ducharme was frustrated with them as well. Just it's not going well, and it appears like it's time to move on. There's been a lot of people questioning the future of Brendan Gallagher as well, but at this point, there's really no reason to think for sure he would want to move, or that they would want to move him. But the Habs are in a similar situation to the Canucks, that they're doing a lot of evaluating. Jeff Gorton's had plenty of time now to see and watch the team. And now, of course, Hughes has only been on board a short time, and they're trying to make a lot of those decisions as well. Some people say as well that Petry is just not fond of playing for head coach Dominic Ducharme. That really, since he's taken over, that's part of the reason why his play isn't great. But I don't know. I mean, if you look at last year, he had a real solid season. But there appears to be friction there. He's been singled out by the coach. And like I said, there are reports saying that he's just not fond of playing for him for whatever reasons that might be. And clearly his family's not happy being in Quebec anymore, given, I guess, the restrictions and everything that you have to deal with in that province. I mean, we know that Dominic Ducharme has finally coached a full 82-game season now, given when he took over. Obviously, it was a shortened season last year. He's got 82 games now as a head coach, and his record's 23, 45, and 14, which is not great by any means. It's really difficult to say what his future holds with the Habs too. I don't know that they're going to necessarily move on from him in the offseason. Certainly the record is not great, but I guess it depends on a lot of X factors here. They may decide to keep him around for a little while. I don't really know how they're going to handle that. Many people feel it's pretty much a done deal. I've seen numerous people say online they feel Ducharme is gone at the end of the year, and that could very well be. I don't know. I mean, we had a whole new regime here. Quite often they want to have their own guy in there, regardless. That's just a common thing you see, and it's not necessarily always tied to the record, but at the end of the day here, Ducharme's record in a full 82-game season is not looking overly good. We know that there's plenty of other Habs players that are right out there in the trade rumor mill as well, including Jerard, and Lehkonen is getting lots of attention as well. Kulak's out there as well. There's going to be a fair bit of turnover in this organization, and it's hard to say what it all takes place. I mean, the guys who need contracts, like Jerard, Lehkonen, they're probably gone before the deadline. A Jeff Petry trade might have to wait until the offseason when teams have a little bit more flexibility. But I had mentioned a while back that there was obviously, this kind of relates back to more of a rumor we talked about in December, when there was talk about there, potentially being a trade, and it kind of makes sense if he did indeed have conversations with management then, saying I would welcome a trade, not saying I'm demanding one, but I'm open to it. It kind of makes sense why insiders were kind of talking about it the way they were at the time. And I said at one point there was kind of linkage to maybe the Red Wings, but it's hard to say if Eiserman has interest in bringing Petry to Motown or not. I mean, clearly they've had some vets there. They do have some space, which makes it a little bit easier, but hard to say. I'm not sure that the Habs would get a lot in return, but they'd get the cap flexibility, which could go a long way as well. But let me know your thoughts on the Montreal Canadiens. Jeff Petry, do you see a market for him? Where do you see him potentially ending up? And what other moves do you think we're going to see here ahead of the deadline? Things appear to be getting pretty heated up here in the rumor mill, and we still have about 6 weeks weeks to go before the deadline, so we probably will have to wait a little while before we see a lot of this activity. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.